The Galactic Council had never taken Earth seriously. For hundreds of cycles, they had watched the blue planet spin quietly in its corner of the spiral arm, its people loud and chaotic, its governments short-lived, its technology messy but clever. After humanity's third encounter with interstellar species ended in a brutal skirmish near the edge of Mars's orbit, where both alien vessels and human ships were vaporized in a fiery clash of confusion and fear, the Council voted to isolate Earth. They called it a Class 7 quarantine, the highest level, sealed by decree and backed by a line of observation satellites and stealth drones meant to ensure humans stayed inside their star system. But over the years, the rest of the galaxy forgot why the quarantine was created in the first place. Rumors of humanity's unpredictable nature became jokes in popular culture. The children of noble races giggled at stories of humans building bombs before inventing proper space travel. Hollow memes portrayed humans as loud, emotional primitives wrapped in metal shells. Most species saw Earth as a bizarre petri dish of irrational evolution, but to Ambassador Velix of the Tonaxi Unity, the planet was a curiosity worth studying. He had heard of the humans' strange biological tolerance to radiation and disease, their unmatched ability to adapt under pressure, and their confusing art of war that prioritized unpredictability. Yet he believed the quarantine was simply outdated xenopolitics. So when his long-range patrol vessel picked up a faint but repeating signal from the edge of Earth's space, his antennae perked up. The message was locked behind layers of encryption and looped endlessly, broadcasting through ancient human frequencies. The only words translated by the ship's AI were chilling in their simplicity: "Do not open." Velix, an academic and diplomat, found the phrase amusing, an echo of childish warnings written on boxes not to be touched. He ignored his co-pilot's nervous protests and initiated a decryption scan. The process was slow, burning through processor cores and requiring direct neural sync. As the encryption cracked, a cold shiver ran down Velix's spine, though he couldn't explain why. The screen flashed once, then again, and then the data streamed in. A flood of visual and audio logs, unfiltered and raw, compressed into high-density files with human military tags. The moment the images played, Velix's body stiffened. It began with darkness, then explosions tearing across a barren battlefield under a red sky. Earth soldiers in mismatched armor dashed between craters, carrying wounded comrades and firing kinetic rifles with precision. One of them knelt beside a downed alien, not human, bandaging its wounds while shielding it from incoming fire. There was shouting, not in anger but urgency, and then silence broken by distant screams. The feed changed. Another battlefield. This one lunar with entire fleets burned into the grey dust. Alien ships, huge and elegant, shattered by brutal, efficient human firepower. The footage wasn't clean like Council battle records. It was messy, gritty, filmed from helmet cams and drone feeds, and it all looked recent. Every video was time-stamped, only weeks or months old. Earth had been silent to the galaxy for decades, but here they were, not only fighting but winning. The final image froze Velix in his seat. A young human woman, eyes dark with exhaustion, stared into a drone's lens. Her face was smeared with ash, her helmet cracked, and behind her were smoking ruins, both alien and human. She spoke in clean, galactic common. "We told you not to come," she said, her voice calm but heavy with something deeper, grief, perhaps, or warning. Then the feed cut. Velix blinked, his breathing ragged. His neural links screamed with sensory feedback. His co-pilot was shouting, trying to purge the ship's core of the files, but it was too late. The data had copied itself, embedded in every relay and sensor, spreading like a virus. Across the Council's outer communication net, fragments of the footage began leaking. shared by rogue AIs, picked up by curious explorers, and eventually broadcast in full across major information hubs. At first, viewers thought it was fiction, an elaborate simulation or propaganda, but metadata confirmed the terrifying truth. These were not stories. These were records. Council citizens who had once mocked the humans watched in silence as the primitives fought impossible battles against enemies unknown to the Council's databases. No one recognized the attackers, tall, shadowed beings with impossible weapons that twisted light and sound. The humans didn't just fight them, they studied them, and they held the line. The laughter faded from the council chambers, replaced by silence and cold analysis. How had Earth, cut off from trade, without allies or guidance, built such weapons? Why had they not called for help? Why were the battles fought far from Earth's orbit, as though they were trying to keep something out or in? Velix, recovering in the medical wing of his vessel, stared blankly at the ceiling, hearing the human woman's voice echo in his thoughts again and again. "We told you not to come." He realized then that the quarantine had not been a prison. It had been a shield, not for humanity, for everyone else, and now the shield was cracked. Something was moving in the darkness beyond Soul's Edge, and the only ones who had been fighting it were the very people the galaxy had chosen to laugh at. The signal spread faster than anyone in the Galactic Council could predict. Within hours of Ambassador Velix's unauthorized decryption, the transmission had found its way into deep-net nodes, pirate frequencies, and even public broadcast networks. At first, most dismissed it as some elaborate hoax, an attempt to stir up old fears about Earth and its people. But then experts from multiple species began analyzing the footage, verifying the timestamps, recognizing the planetary surfaces, and comparing them with known space near Sol. What they discovered silenced even the loudest critics. The battles had not occurred on Earth's surface, nor in its orbit, but far beyond, on moons in empty voids, and on outposts never logged in council records. The fighting was not against any known species. The enemy's shapes were unclear, sometimes humanoid, sometimes like living shadows, and sometimes shifting into twisted, unnatural forms. They used weapons that bent gravity, tore apart matter without sound, and erased entire squads in an instant. But the most shocking part was that the humans fought back, and not only survived, but adapted. In one clip, a squad of Marines was wiped out by a beam of silent energy. In the next, the same unit, now reinforced, returned with modified armor that bent the same beam back toward its source. The humans learned fast. They didn't wait for reinforcements or approval. They fought, with purpose, not recklessness. The soldiers bore strange insignias never seen in any Earth documentation. Some called themselves the Sol Peace Authority. Others bore simple patches that read, "The Line Holds." All of them acted with brutal unity, never breaking formation, even when faced with unimaginable horror. Across the council, governments panicked. Emergency meetings were held in secret chambers. Species who once saw Earth as a backwater world now combed their records for anything they had missed. The Driven Empire, who had quietly lost an entire exploration fleet in Sol space the year before, finally came forward. Their fleet had gone silent within 2 hours of entering the edge of the system. No wreckage was ever recovered, until now. In the footage from the signal, a cratered moon showed unmistakable fragments of driven hulls, and nearby, human soldiers were seen dragging out survivors from the ruins, guarding them while firing on unseen attackers. The truth hit hard. Humanity had not started a war. They had been fighting someone else's battles, cleaning up after alien mistakes, and they had done it without a single word to the galaxy. They had quarantined themselves not out of fear, but out of responsibility, and now their silence was broken. In the central hall of the Galactic Council, the Yandari ambassador, once the loudest voice mocking Earth's quarantine, stood in disbelief as more footage was played. In one scene, a lone human soldier, chest heaving and suit torn, dragged an alien civilian from rubble. The soldier's comm unit broadcast one phrase, spoken in 20 different languages: "Protect the innocent. Species doesn't matter." Around her, bodies of shadow creatures twitched and dissolved. The soldier coughed blood, but smiled as she reached a shuttle, shoving the alien child inside. Then she turned, facing the dark alone. The camera feed ended as the shadows closed in. The hall remained silent for minutes afterward. The footage had changed everything. Old treaties, policies, and assumptions were now being questioned. If humans were fighting creatures that defied all known science, why hadn't they called for help? And more importantly, how had they survived? The Council Intelligence Corps released a report that only deepened the mystery. Human technology, while still crude by Council standards, showed remarkable improvisation. Their weapons were cobbled together from salvaged alien parts, reprogrammed AI cores, and even components from Council drones. Yet somehow they worked, often better than the originals. But the biggest question remained: who were the enemy? No species recognized them. No records, no diplomatic encounters, no trade logs matched the beings in the footage. Some theorized they were extra-dimensional, others believed they were ancient and had waited until humanity reached space before striking. The few frames of these creatures caught on camera were corrupted, as if the image itself resisted showing their full form. Their arrival had no visible ships, just ripples in space, sudden gravitational shifts, and cold silence. Their attacks were silent. Their goals unclear, but they targeted outposts, moons, and deep space stations, especially ones with rich energy signatures. What made humanity the target or the defender was unknown, but it was clear they were in the middle of it, and they were keeping it from spreading. Back aboard the Ternaxi vessel, Velex recovered slowly. The neural shock from the transmission had faded, but the images were burned into his memory. He had traveled across 2 galaxies, seen wars, peace treaties, civil uprisings, but nothing like what he saw in that signal. The humans weren't conquering. They weren't begging for help. They were simply holding the line. The ship's AI filtered new incoming fragments, more footage, new logs. Some came from drone feeds, others from hacked enemy tech. The signals all repeated the same metadata tag: Category Black, engage with caution, do not transmit. Velex realized then that the signal hadn't been meant for outsiders. It had been a warning to humans themselves, perhaps to keep other units from accessing it. But now that it had leaked, the entire galaxy had seen what Earth was really doing. Panic spread to the fringe worlds first. Outposts near Sol began evacuating. Some attempted to contact Earth directly, but got no reply. The system was still silent, no response, no diplomatic invitation, no threat. Just silence, and a constant message broadcasting through the void: do not open. But curiosity and fear clashed across species. Was humanity the key to stopping this unknown enemy? Or were they already compromised, fighting a war they were destined to lose? The Council decided to act. A proposal was made to send an envoy, not a fleet, not a threat, but a diplomatic group made up of scientists, peacekeepers, and translators from multiple species. Their task: make peaceful contact with Earth, understand the nature of the enemy, and find out how humanity had held the line alone. The vote passed, but narrowly. Some feared it was already too late. The humans had opened a door to something, vast and dark, and now the galaxy was hearing echoes. Meanwhile, on the dark side of a moon orbiting a gas giant in a forgotten part of space, a human soldier recorded a final log. His voice was steady. Sector 47L lost. Command confirms breach. Reinforcements en route. Civilians evacuated. No survivors among first platoon. Uploading log to long-range relay. If you receive this, stay away. We're holding as long as we can. Behind him, dark shapes moved in the mist, and then the screen turned black. Back on the Tanaxi vessel, Velix closed the screen and looked at his crew, all of whom now waited for his command. For the first time, he hesitated. The universe had laughed at the humans, but the laughter had ended, and now, with the signal wide open and fear creeping, through every corner of the galaxy, they had to ask themselves one terrible question. What if humanity wasn't the threat, but the only shield they had left? The Grand Council Hall of the Galactic Core was built to impress, a vast chamber of gleaming crystal walls, floating light panels, and whisper-quiet ventilation that always carried the scent of serenity. But that day, it was filled with the sound of raised voices, flickering hollow screens, and nervous claws tapping against metal tables as leaders from over 40 species gathered in emergency session, many of them still trembling from the images that had flooded the networks only days earlier, footage showing humans not as the primitive, erratic race most had believed, but as hardened soldiers fighting an unknown enemy in cold. Silent war zones across forgotten corners of space, footage filled with strange weapons, desperate messages, and, most disturbing of all, countless warnings that none had heeded, now echoing through every known channel. Do not come. Hold the line. This is not your fight, and despite all the arrogance and mocking of the past, the Council could no longer laugh, because what they saw wasn't a struggling species. What they saw were defenders standing against something the galaxy had never faced and possibly could not survive. The Yandari ambassador, once so loud and dismissive about Earth, now sat pale and quiet, watching the looping footage again as if hoping it might change. But it didn't. The same moon battlefield, the same burned-out craters, the same human soldier hauling a wounded alien to cover while whispering calm orders, then turning to face the shadows alone, her rifle lighting up the night just before the feed cut out. And the Council's fear wasn't just because the humans were fighting, it was because of who or what they were fighting, because none of the creatures in the footage were recognizable. And worse, they seemed to disrupt sensors, blur camera frames, and damage files simply by being seen, like reality itself resisted recording them. And that kind of interference meant one terrifying thing. These enemies might not be bound by the physical laws the rest of the galaxy lived under. The driven delegation finally confessed, speaking in low voices, that their fleet had not been destroyed by a natural hazard, as they had claimed last year, but by something near Earth's outer system, something they had never seen before, that attacked without sound, without warning, and without a trace of normal weaponry. And they admitted they had found fragments of their ships later, on moons in asteroid belts, but they had covered it up, out of shame and fear. And now, the Council realized that the humans had been cleaning up. After them, without a word, sealing breaches, destroying enemy nests, and guarding space that wasn't even theirs, all while the galaxy pointed fingers and laughed behind locked borders. Panic took root when it was revealed that Earth had silently expanded, small unregistered outposts scattered across dead systems near Sol, almost invisible but clearly military, each marked by a quiet symbol. A circle broken by a single line, now understood as the sign of the human line corps. A group no one had ever heard of, yet clearly the front line of this hidden war. Questions flew across the chamber. How long had this war gone on? What were these creatures? Were they invaders? Experiments gone wrong? Ancient evils returned, or something even older and unknown? And no one had answers, not even the most advanced species, whose long-range scans of human space now revealed strange fluctuations in energy, gravitational tears, and massive debris fields where battles had clearly taken place, but without any record in council logs, because no one had been watching. Not really. and the quarantine that had been meant to protect the galaxy from humans now seemed to have protected the galaxy from something far worse. The Frollan scholars pointed out that some of the symbols etched on human armor and gear matched old warnings found on derelict worlds, dead ruins that had been declared haunted or cursed by ancient travelers. And when language AIs cross-referenced those symbols, they found phrases like Voidwalker, Black Edge, and Beyond the Silence, which sent a wave of dread through every species present, because those phrases had appeared in deep history, warnings carved into stone, whispered in the oldest myths, tales of things that came from the dark between stars and fed on thought and light, dismissed for eons as legend, until now. Several species demanded immediate contact with Earth to open dialogue, send peacekeepers or aid, but others shouted them down, warning that interference might make things worse or even spread the threat beyond control. And somewhere in the chaos, a proposal formed to send a small envoy, not a military force, just a diplomatic team, one ship with a joint crew, protected by shields and observation drones, to enter Sol space, request an audience, and learn the truth from the humans themselves. But even this idea caused arguments, as some feared the humans would see it as aggression, while others worried that whatever the humans were fighting might follow the envoy back if they were not careful. As they debated, new data came in, more fragments of the signal Velex had unlocked, now spreading in new layers, some of it intentionally encoded in outdated human languages, as if trying to hide from something else watching. And when translated, the logs revealed strange, fragmented journal entries from human soldiers. One spoke of shadows whispering inside helmets, another of dreams shared between squads, and one chilling line read, "They don't see the humans anymore. They see what we carry," suggesting that the war might not be entirely physical, and perhaps had already changed those fighting it. The council fell silent again when a final image played. This one clearer than most, an alien ship barely holding together, floating near the asteroid belt of the Sol system, picked up by a passing drone. And as the camera zoomed in, a message flickered across the hull, scorched into the metal in a dozen languages, including Galactic Common. "We held the gate. You weren't ready." The ship was empty. No bodies, no crew, just that message. The silence in the hall grew heavy. Some council members whispered of evacuation plans, others of quarantine upgrades, but none of it felt like enough. Because for the first time in living memory, the galaxy faced a threat it did not understand. And the only species who had faced it, survived it, were the humans, the same species they had mocked, ignored, and locked away. Now Earth stood silent still, no responses to messages, no change in movement, just the quiet signal repeating again from somewhere deep in their system. "Do not open." The galaxy had laughed at the quarantine once. Now no one was laughing. Now they were wondering if the door had already been opened. The diplomatic ship, Harmony's Whisper, glided slowly into the edge of Sol space, its surface shining with layered shields and reflective armor, carrying a carefully chosen crew of scientists, translators, envoys, and peacekeepers from 9 different species, all selected for calm minds and clear records, none carrying weapons. Only hopes and questions, and as they passed the last automated beacon left by the Galactic Council, everything ahead of them went quiet. No stars blinked, no transmissions buzzed. Just a vast and unsettling silence, broken only by the signal that pulsed steadily through the void from Earth's direction. "Do not open." And yet they kept going. Hearts heavy, hands tight. Some afraid not of meeting humans again, but of what might be watching with them. The pilot, a 3-eyed Cathari named Lom, kept his fingers over the manual controls, just in case something shut down the ship's AI. And beside him sat the Ternaxi ambassador Velex, now fully recovered from the neural burn he suffered when he decrypted the human signal. Though his sleep was still disturbed by the faces he'd seen in that footage, Tired, determined human soldiers walking calmly into shadows that erased even light. And behind them, the rest of the envoy remained in tight, near-silent formation, eyes locked on monitors as the ship passed through the asteroid belt and into the inner system, where Sol's golden light touched them for the first time. They expected Earth to appear like a fortress, bristling with defensive satellites, automated drones, warning shots, but instead they found stillness, cold and clean, as if the entire planet was holding its breath. No defense grid activated, no warnings were fired, no voices came from the surface. The ship sent out a diplomatic greeting on every known channel. "We come in peace. We request an audience. We carry no weapons." For a moment there was nothing, then, without warning, a single response flickered across their screens, not in words, but in coordinates, pointing not to Earth itself, but to the dark side of Luna, the moon, where ancient shadows stretched across a vast scarred plain that bore no name on any Council star map. The envoy hesitated, then turned toward the moon, slowly descending through stillness. As they reached low orbit, they saw something none of their maps had shown, an outpost hidden in a crater, smooth walls almost fused with the stone, and symbols etched into the rock in old Terran languages that their AIs struggled to translate. And the closest match said something like, "Watchers of the Gate." The ship landed on a marked platform, and still no humans came to greet them. Instead, a wide metal door slid open in the rock, revealing a long, dark tunnel lit only by faint blue lights that pulsed like heartbeats. The crew exchanged looks, and finally, Velek stepped forward, taking the lead. As he walked into the tunnel, the rest followed. Inside, the silence deepened, not just around them, but inside their minds, a heavy quiet that felt like something was listening, not hostile, but present, watching without form. At the end of the corridor they found a chamber, round, smooth, with screens lining the walls, all dark except one. On that single screen stood a human in full armor, helmet removed. Face tired, eyes sharp, voice calm. "We did not invite you," the human said, not unkindly, but with a weariness that shook even the boldest among them. Velek stepped forward. "We come in peace. We saw the signal. We wish to understand." The human nodded slowly, as if weighing every word. "Understanding comes with cost. Are you prepared to carry what we carry?" No one answered at first. Then a young scholar from the Avrix delegation stepped forward. "Yes," she said simply. The human sighed and touched something out of view. The chamber darkened, and then the screens lit up, each showing a moment from the war, not clips like before, but live recordings taken from helmets, drones, and satellites. They watched as humans fought across moons and derelict ships, against creatures that flickered between shapes, that screamed without sound, that tore through time and thought and armor alike. They saw humans fall and get back up, saw them whisper words to each other through the noise. "We hold. No retreat. They don't get past us." But worst of all, the footage shifted to a black field beyond Pluto, where something vast moved in the dark, a shape without edges, like a wound in the stars, and dozens of human ships formed a wall in front of it, holding position, their captains speaking one last time before going silent. "Burn the sky before they break through." The feed ended. The room was silent. The human finally spoke. "We made contact once, just like you are now, but we opened the wrong door. We saw too much. We brought something back." Velek stepped forward again. "Then, why didn't you ask for help?" The human looked at him, not angry, not cold, just quiet. "Because we didn't want to risk anyone else. This isn't a war that ends with a treaty. This isn't an enemy you can reason with. They feed on thought, on connection, on noise. The more you spread the word, the more they hear. That's why we quarantined ourselves. That's why we erased the records. That's why we warned you not to come." The air in the room felt thinner now. The crew began to understand. They hadn't just risked contact with humans, they had brought attention to themselves. The human leaned forward. But now you're here, and they know. Behind the human, another screen flickered on, showing a new field, somewhere near the edge of the system. Small distortions moved there, tiny tears in space. They've followed you. The room fell into chaos as the envoy began to argue, some shouting to evacuate, others calling to contact the council. The human raised a hand. You don't have time. You need to leave, now. We'll hold them off as long as we can, but you must quarantine your species. No broadcasts, no signals. Lock your gates and remember what you saw here. Velix shook his head slowly. But what about you? The human smiled, just barely. We're already in. There's no going back. For us. Then the screens went black and the floor beneath them shifted. Moments later, they found themselves back on their ship. No memory of walking there, no sign of the tunnel or the base. Only a single message burned into their central console. Close the door. They didn't hesitate. The Harmony's whisper turned at once, engines lighting the dark as they fled toward council space, silent, shaken, afraid. And behind them, far beyond the moon, faint flashes began in the black, like distant stars dying and being born again. And the humans, silent still, took their stations. As Harmony's whisper raced away from the Sol system, every screen aboard flickered with fragments of what they had just witnessed, yet no one spoke, not even Velix, whose thoughts had become a storm of questions and silent fear. And though the stars outside still looked the same, everyone aboard the diplomatic vessel now understood something terrible. The galaxy had been watching the wrong danger for years, mistaking humanity for the threat, while never realizing that the real enemy had already slipped past their defenses, hiding in the empty spaces between thoughts, in the silence between signals, growing stronger in the noise of civilization. And now that the envoy had made contact, it was too late to undo the damage, because they had been followed. The first sign came only hours later, an automated warning from a distant relay station in Sector 9, reporting impossible sensor feedback, like thousands of things moving at once, but with no mass, no heat, no light, only distortion, like space itself was folding in and out around them. And then the relay went dark. Council networks tried to re-establish contact, but every probe sent afterward simply vanished, leaving behind garbled bursts of data filled with symbols no one had written, as if something else had overwritten their language, something ancient and wrong. Panic spread again, this time louder, harsher. As leaders and scientists demanded answers, the envoy could not fully explain, because even they did not understand what they had seen, only that the humans had warned them, and now that warning echoed. In every hallway of the Grand Council's chambers, close the door. But there was no door left to close. The silence had been broken. The real enemy had heard them. While many believed these creatures, these shadows, as some now called them, were merely hostile invaders, others began to notice patterns in the behavior, strange gaps in memory, people who returned from the edge of infected zones, speaking in unfamiliar tones, using words they had never learned, or drawing symbols they had never seen before. And when those drawings were compared to what was seen in the human footage, the match was exact. Something was not just attacking from the outside, it was getting in, infiltrating minds, changing thoughts, whispering through ideas. That was when the first council member vanished. Elder Jarell of the Elvenari species simply walked into a council meeting, placed both hands on the table, and said one phrase, "We are already here," before disappearing into thin air, leaving behind only his robes and a smear of black ash. From that moment things grew worse. Entire moons began to lose contact, with distress calls coming too late to respond. Research stations returned garbled logs, showing crew members staring at blank walls for days, whispering to themselves, some with eyes burned out from looking directly into what they called the veil. These were not just creatures. They were ideas made dangerous, thoughts that corrupted reality, and humanity had somehow kept them at bay through isolation, through sacrifice, through silence. Velex, shaken by this truth, returned to the records of the outpost on Luna, trying to decode what the human had meant when they said, "We brought something back." After days of work, he found a fragmented report buried deep in a hidden layer of the shared signal. A journal from a human explorer dated centuries ago, long before the quarantine began. The entry described an expedition beyond the Oort cloud, where a strange signal had been detected, too old and too faint to be natural. When they followed it, they found a derelict station, floating in blackness, filled with bones not made of carbon, with rooms that twisted when observed, with symbols that pulsed when spoken aloud. One crew member spoke the symbols out loud during analysis. That was the last log entry. What came after was silence. No names, no voices. Just one line. The message is alive. That station was never marked on human maps again, and its coordinates had been deleted, sealed, and erased from every system except one. Somehow the shadows had survived, passed through that message, used it as a door. And now that door had been cracked open again. The real enemy had never been humans. It had been the message, the language, the signal, and now it was spreading, not just in waves of war, but in memory, in sound, in symbols carved onto walls in faraway colonies, where people no longer remembered why they had drawn them. Some believed the humans had tried to warn them not only with the quarantine, but with stories. Their old science fiction tales, full of horror, invasion, silent wars in the void. Tales that now seemed more like records, warnings wrapped in fiction. Desperate, the council called an emergency summit, this time with no screens, no connections to the greater network, in a sealed chamber beneath the ice planet Veldar, where thoughts could not travel far. There, Velex made a terrible suggestion. "We must return to Earth," he said, "not as envoys, but as students. The humans know how to fight this. They've lived with it. We need them to teach us." The idea met resistance. Many feared it would bring the shadows even closer, but others knew there was no other way. So under high secrecy, another ship was prepared, faster, smaller, shielded not only against matter, but against signal and sound. Its crew trained not to speak or think freely near certain zones. And with the coordinates of the lunar base once more in hand, they departed, praying they were not already too late. Meanwhile, in deep space near the frontier, a single distress call blinked from a listening post in Sector 12, where ships had recently vanished. The message came in broken pieces, with a voice that flickered in and out, repeating the same line until the receiver shut itself down. "The enemy is thought. The enemy is thought. The enemy is..." Then silence. As the ship entered Sol space again, everything felt changed, not in shape or structure, but in weight, as if the system itself was pushing back. Near Luna, the base lights were dimmed, and when they arrived, no one greeted them. Instead, the same human soldier from before appeared on a screen, but this time, her armor was cracked, her voice lower, her eyes darker. "You're back," she said. "It's already moving faster than we hoped." They asked if there was still time. She looked past the camera. "Maybe, but not much. The real enemy is not them. It's us. Once we hear them, once we understand the words, we carry the virus." The crew froze. One whispered, "Then is this a war of sound?" She nodded. "Sound, thought, pattern. We call them mimetic predators. They don't kill you, they rewrite you piece by piece." The chamber shuddered. Somewhere, something screamed, but only inside their heads. The soldier stepped closer to the camera. "If you still have a clean mind, protect it. And for the love of all your stars, stop sending signals, stop speaking their names, forget them." But it was too late. The enemy had already been named. The stars over Earth no longer seemed familiar as the final council ship, named Last Light, drifted in silence above the dead side of the moon, its engines barely humming, its crew ordered to speak only through thought-sealed helmets. Their words filtered through layers of encryption, not to protect against the humans, but against themselves. For every mind was now a gate, and every thought a possible infection, and what they had learned since their second return had shattered all illusions of safety. For the enemy was not only real, not only near, it was already inside them, waiting, patient, feeding on knowledge, curiosity and memory. And now the humans no longer stood as soldiers guarding an infected world, but as broken watchers atop. The ruins of an old defense that had cracked long ago, fighting not to win, but to delay the inevitable. The Council had once believed in structure, in unity, in reason, but what they faced now followed none of those rules, and Last Light carried a final mission, not to form alliances, not to share data, but to retrieve the only thing left that could help them understand how Earth had survived for so long. The archive, a sealed human memory vault, hidden beneath what remained of old Geneva, buried deep under ice and stone and silence, where no signal had reached for over a century. As they descended, Earth looked lifeless at first, oceans still, clouds unmoving, cities swallowed by vines and dust. But infrared scans showed activity underground, tunnels of heat and power weaving beneath continents like veins, still guarded by automated drones that hovered without sound, their optics flashing once before vanishing into mist. The crew, led by Velix and two others, landed in silence near the base of the old Alps, stepping out into a world that felt paused in time. The sky grey, the wind cold, not from nature, but from something watching. The entrance to the archive opened by itself, metal plates folding away with a smoothness that felt unnatural, as if expecting them. Inside, they walked for what felt like hours, past long corridors covered in human writing that twisted when looked at too long, signs of struggle scorched into the walls, burn marks in strange shapes that didn't match any known weapon. Finally, they reached the heart of the vault, a circular chamber filled with glass orbs hovering in perfect stillness, each containing a fragment of a memory, a whisper of the past, and among them one glowed faint blue, the core. Velix reached out carefully and touched it, and in that moment the world around him changed. He was no longer in the vault, but standing in a burning field, under a black sky, beside a human woman wearing cracked armor and a grim smile. "This is the last story," she said, not looking at him, "and maybe the most dangerous." Around them shadows moved like liquid smoke, twisting in shapes that never fully formed, and the woman continued, "We once believed we could fight them with weapons, then with silence. But nothing truly worked. They are not a race, not even a thing. They are a mistake made by thought itself. The first ones to find them thought they had discovered truth, a higher pattern, a secret behind the stars. But the truth was never meant to be seen. It unravels minds." Velix tried to speak, but no words came. She turned to him finally. "You saw the signal, you saw the war, but you didn't see the cost. We are no longer what we were. To survive, we changed ourselves. Cut out the parts they could twist, burned the parts they could follow. Every memory in this vault is filtered, shielded, broken, and rebuilt. That is why we still remain." She held out her hand and offered him something small, a shard of black glass, humming softly. "Take this. Show your people, but know this. If you think about what it means too deeply, they will find you. If you speak of them by name, they will answer. And if your species cannot stop chasing forbidden light, then you will fall, just as we did." Then she was gone, Velix fell backward into his body, gasping, shaking, the shard now real in his hand, pulsing like a heartbeat. The others stared, afraid to ask what he had seen. As they turned to leave, the archive began to close behind them, as if the vault itself had grown tired of being remembered. They returned to Last Light and fled Earth without another word, cutting off all broadcasts, shielding all signals. But it was too late. Somewhere in the data they carried, something had slipped through. Not the shard, but the idea, the pattern. A tiny flicker of wrongness now buried deep in their ship's core, invisible to scans, too abstract to delete. And as the crew slept, one by one, their dreams began to change. In council space, rumors spread quickly of stars blinking out in the far edges, of old languages returning in fragments, of symbols appearing in dreams and paintings and computer. Code, all repeating the same image, a circle with 3 jagged lines through it, the mark seen on the human helmets, now spreading without sound. Some wanted to warn the others. Others said nothing, too afraid, but the humans had told them the enemy was thought. The illusion of safety was shattered now. There would be no clear war, no army to fight. Only a slow unraveling, piece by piece, across time and memory. In the deep silence between stars, something listened, and now it remembered their names.